Lucas and I have shared a bond of love and friendship for 28 years. Just when I found myself in desperate need of his support, he abandoned me on the operating table to be with another woman. When I handed him the divorce papers, he gazed at me with a sorrowful look, tears brimming in his eyes like those of a child. Yet, Lucas, it was supposed to be me who would be the one shedding the most tears. This journey was meant to commemorate our 5th wedding anniversary. To secure his agreement for this 2-day trip, I had to orchestrate a scene at his workplace. Whenever I requested his companionship at home, he always cited work as a reason, neglecting my pleas. If love is absent, what purpose does celebrating a wedding anniversary serve? He must have found my fixation on this anniversary laughable. So, I created a disturbance at his company. Lucas was engrossed in a meeting when I showed up. His usually stern demeanor darkened upon seeing me. The meeting paused, and each department head respectfully bypassed me. But I sensed their whispers behind my back. Sophia used to be so gentle. Why is she acting like a shrew lately? It's true. Prolonged loneliness in a marriage can erode one's sense of self and breed self-doubt. Lucas massaged his temples wearily, his patience thinning as he inquired, "What is it?" Leaning casually against the doorframe, I responded with a smile. "What else would you think I'm here for? Our wedding anniversary." Lucas stared at me, disbelief etched on his face, as if he thought I had lost my mind to create a scene at the office over a mere anniversary. He pulled me into the meeting room, closing the glass door to shield us from outside gossip. "What's wrong with you, Sophia? I really want to break open your head and see what's inside," he snapped angrily, jabbing my forehead. It felt odd. In our younger days, I enjoyed witnessing his temper flare, knowing he couldn't hurt me despite his frustration. Back then, I would seize the moment to grab his hand and bite it hard, finding his futile attempts to swap me both humorous and endearing. But now, all I felt was disgust. He had become filthy inside and out. I pushed his hand away in revulsion and demanded, "Are you coming or not? Lucas, you know me. I won't stop until I get what I want. I have plenty of time to waste on you." Seeing my indifference, his anger dissipated, replaced by disappointment. Eventually, he slumped helplessly onto the conference table, exhausted. "Sophia, how did you become so unreasonable?" he asked wearily. Observing his pain and distress, as if the pressure I exerted was unbearable, made me question why I had grown so unreasonable. Perhaps it was because I no longer loved him, so I refused to empathize with his feelings or adjust myself to accommodate him. Without love, seeing his pain felt justifiable. Marriage involves 2 people. It can't solely be me deteriorating and decaying within it. If he wishes to escape the bonds of marriage, I'll grant him that freedom. But it comes with consequences. On the day of our anniversary trip, while brushing my teeth, I brushed too vigorously and accidentally poked my gum, causing a sharp pain. Clenching my teeth in agony, I heard Lucas on the phone in the bedroom. "After the anniversary, I'll come see you. Take care of yourself and the baby. If anything happens, you can contact my mom or the doctor." His voice was gentle and soothing, filled with reassurance and comfort, a tone I hadn't heard from him in a long time. Our last conversation had been just last night. I showed him the hotel reservation I had made, and he erupted once more. He paced the living room, his patience waning as his frustration built up with no outlet for his agitation. Finally, unable to contain himself, he unleashed his anger on me. His eyes blazed with fury, his face flushed with suppressed rage, neck veins bulging like a caged beast ready to break free. "Sophia, why are you always so self-righteous? Can't you be more sensible? The company is busy lately. We can take the anniversary trip whenever." "Sophia, can't you stop being so unreasonable? I can't attend work functions without drinking. How can the company operate properly?" Each word was an accusation of my incompetence in our marriage. I stared blankly at the man before me, seething with anger, his features twisted in rage. I contemplated for a long time, but couldn't find a reason to continue loving him. I once truly loved him, but now my disappointment in him was overwhelming. Reflecting on this, the gum pain vanished, replaced by a sharp, stabbing sensation in my heart. I gazed at my fading reflection in the mirror. Lately, I had almost failed to recognize the woman staring back at me. Her face was filled with sorrow and worry, resembling a wilting rose. its youthful vibrancy gone, only the decaying form hinting at its former beauty. They say marriage is the tomb of love. Initially, I didn't believe that saying. Lucas and I had been together for 28 years, celebrating from our 1-month anniversary to our first steps together. From the little red flower in kindergarten to the perfect score certificate in elementary school, from red envelopes during the new year to a scholarship for further education, from the challenges of starting a business to the company going public. We transitioned from school uniforms to wedding gowns, from youthful naivety to mature stability, accumulating countless memories that seemed too many to hold on to. I believed we had seamlessly blended our lives together. The Lucas who once centered everything around me couldn't possibly want me to lose faith in love. The diamond ring on my right ring finger was a gift from Lucas after he achieved success. He had stood before me, holding the ring with hopeful, star-filled eyes, earnestly promising, "Sophia, I can finally give you a happy life. I will make you happy forever." Yet, after 5 years of wearing it, its sparkle had dulled, much like our deteriorating marriage. When I emerged from the bathroom, he appeared briefly flustered before hastily ending his phone call in a disguised manner. When he eventually looked at me as if nothing had happened, his eyes were devoid of emotion, quickly averting our gaze. "Hurry up and pack for the trip. I'll prepare breakfast." After last night, he had made compromises. I watched his busy figure in the kitchen for a long time, reminiscing about all the moments we had shared. At that moment, as he turned to meet my gaze, a fleeting moment of confusion crossed his face before he began to scold me. "Sophia, are you up to mischief again? I'm tired lately. I don't have the energy to play with you." I smiled at him, a rare gesture. "Lucas, don't worry. This is the last time." It had been ages since we had a calm conversation, and seeing me like this, he stood frozen with the bowl in his hand. Finally, with a smile that hinted at compromise, he said, "Sophia, I know I've been neglectful due to work recently, but once this period is over, things will improve." I smiled silently, but Lucas, we no longer have a future together. Last night, Lucas was out drinking with clients, so I drove the car myself. We didn't speak the entire way. In Lucas's eyes, our marriage resembled a piece of gum that had been chewed for a long time, still retaining some flavor but losing its initial sweetness, making it a pity to just discard it. Despite his sincere efforts not being insincere, I kept my eyes fixed on the road, eager to reach our destination swiftly. The place we had chosen for our anniversary was where Lucas and I had grown up together. A quaint town that still preserved the historic charm of its architecture, untouched by major reconstruction or damage. Now a tourist hotspot. A few years ago, Lucas had donated to our junior high school, and during our honeymoon, we had visited it. We had agreed to return there every year thereafter. One reason was the beautiful scenery. Another was the multitude of happy memories we had created there. And the third was because my parents' graves were located there. When memories become burdensome, the person who struggles the most to break free becomes weighed down. Lucas's phone rang in the car, and he hesitated visibly. I glanced at the caller ID out of the corner of my eye. It was Lucy. With me present, he wasn't free to answer the call. Afraid of revealing his actions, he grew more agitated, and, after turning off the screen, roughly shoved the phone into his pocket. Not long after, the phone rang again. To ensure we spent our anniversary together, I had made it known to everyone at the company that Lucy was at home with Lucas, making it inevitable for the company to hear about it. After all, Lucy had numerous friends and informants within the company, all waiting to exploit the situation once she climbed the corporate ladder. It was now or never. She was targeting me, and naturally, I couldn't let her off easily. Otherwise, there were countless ways to force Lucas to spend the anniversary with me without making it a public spectacle. She couldn't wait to call, merely to assert her presence and also to undermine me. I smiled and asked, "Aren't you going to answer it? It's been—" But Lucas ignored the call, looking annoyed and indifferent. "It's not urgent." Seeing his nonchalant attitude, it didn't seem urgent at all. Yet, just 2 weeks ago, he had panicked over a call from that woman, leaving me alone in the hospital. I had been suffering from a severe stomachache, experiencing so much pain that I nearly fainted from cold sweat. After he took me to the hospital, before we could receive the test results, he received a call from that woman. She had almost had a miscarriage recently, but was now feeling better and didn't feel safe leaving Lucas alone even for a moment. Upon receiving the call, Lucas couldn't mask his panic. He left me in the care of the doctors and rushed out of the ward. My test results came back with appendicitis. Lying on the operating table, it was the second time I had experienced such intense pain. Gazing at the gradually dimming light above the operating room, I had never despised myself as much as I did at that moment. After graduation, he had expressed hope that I would take care of the home while he worked outside. So I gave up my high-paying job to become a housewife, dedicating myself to family and my husband. I believed that by sacrificing everything for the family, I would earn Lucas's appreciation and respect. But what did I end up with? Clearly, it was just the two of us. Yet he became the one busy and exhausted from working outside for the family, while my efforts were gradually buried in the mundanity of daily life, taken for granted. Later, because we couldn't have children, I became the scapegoat for Lucas's family, completely abandoned by him and his relatives. So, he concealed his actions from me and shamelessly pursued another woman. To provide a grandson for the family, my mother-in-law, who had once adored me and sympathized with my early struggles with Lucas during times of poverty, decisively helped Lucas cover up his affair. They believed I was unaware, but in reality, they were the ones who knew nothing. So, what does marriage truly offer a woman? Love, trust, loyalty, and even a beautiful vision of the world. They systematically dismantled my most steadfast beliefs and then crushed my last bit of perseverance. The phone call went unanswered, and the atmosphere turned inexplicably tense. Lucas nervously initiated a conversation. "I heard a few days ago that our elementary school teacher has advanced stomach cancer. How did such a healthy person get this disease?" My heart raced, and I impulsively asked, "If one day I get cancer, Lucas, will you stay by my side?" He frowned at me, barely concealing his anger as he replied, "Sophia, are you uncomfortable if you don't act out? Why are you bringing this up out of nowhere? In the past, if I acted out, he would only compromise, appearing indulgent, yet helpless. So, whether a woman acts out depends on whether the other person loves her." I casually joked, "Just kidding. Why are you so nervous?" Lucas seemed to realize his reaction was too intense. He took a deep breath and said, "Sophia, don't make jokes like this in the future. It's not funny." It seemed he still cared about me, but between us, aside from the irreparable state of our marriage, there was nothing left to hold on to. Even if, in the end, the secrets he hid from me were exposed, for him, it would simply mean a divorce. There was no need to hope for my demise. Soon, Lucy's call came through. Ever since he decided to be with Lucy behind my back, I had received challenges from her. Lucy was a new intern at the company in her early 20s, full of vitality and striking looks. The kind of woman that weary housewives caught up in mundane tasks would be wary of. At that time, I didn't take her seriously. She had added me on the pretext of work, claiming she had heard that Lucas loved his wife dearly, hoping that if she made a mistake at work, I could speak up for her. Initially, I thought this young girl was out of her mind. If it was truly a work mistake, I wouldn't speak up for her. I didn't know her well, and if any intern could approach me so boldly, then the company might as well be a charity organization. Until I noticed that familiar face frequently appearing on her social media, I realized her true intentions. But it was too late, or perhaps I simply didn't know myself well enough before and was overly confident in Lucas. I believed that our more than 20 years of relationship, the fact that I had stood by him through the dark struggles of youth to the dawn, meant that I was irreplaceable in his life. But the truth proved otherwise. I was never the irreplaceable one. It was just that no one had come along to replace me until now. When I picked up the phone, I intentionally put it on speaker. Lucas's expression immediately grew uneasy and flustered. Despite his best efforts to hide it, his strong anxiety was evident. "Sophia, I'm sick and feeling awful," I scoffed. "Calling me when you're sick?" Lucy feigned apprehension and said, "Sophia, I heard you and Lucas are celebrating your wedding anniversary. Hope I'm not disturbing you guys. Even now, I couldn't forget the face she made when she visited me after causing my miscarriage and forcing me to stay in the hospital, showing off birthday photos. Sophia, it was my birthday last night. Lucas was with me the entire time. If you had just listened to me and had the abortion earlier, you wouldn't have needed my help. Lucas's blurred profile was clear in the photo. Last night, as I lay on the operating table with cold instruments moving inside me, when he and my child were taken out, Lucas was celebrating with his new love. Thinking about my poor child stirred a deep anger within me. I had never hated those two wretched people as much as I did at that moment. Lucy continued to apologize remorsefully on the phone, but before I could respond, Lucas snatched the phone away. If you know you're being a bother, then don't call. If you're sick, go to the hospital. If you're not, go check your brain. The call ended abruptly. His actions didn't surprise me. He was never one to be trifled with, which is how he had climbed to the top of his industry at such a young age, earning respect from everyone. Other than Lucas's mother and me, no one else could make him bow his head. But now, Lucy thought having a child would give her some power. Little did she know that aging is inevitable, while youth is eternal. Just as I had given my youth to Lucas, it didn't stop him from abandoning me once he achieved success. If a man chooses you for your youth, he will inevitably choose someone younger later on. So, can't you take good care of yourself? The path was chosen by yourself, so you must be prepared to pay the price. From childhood, Lucas lived next door to my house. When I returned to my mother's hometown for Chinese New Year as a child, I heard people in the village discuss the relationship between Lucas's mother and my mother. My mother and Lucas's mother had been childhood friends. After graduating from high school, my mother left her hometown to attend university and later married my father, who was a classmate at the university, moving to another city. After that, my mother and Lucas's mother lost contact. The next time they met was when Lucas's mother had nowhere else to go and sought refuge with my mother. Lucas's mother had grown up in a family that strongly preferred boys over girls. After she married and had a girl before Lucas, she was pressured by her husband's family to have an abortion. Later, when her husband was killed in a gambling debt dispute, Lucas's mother discovered she was pregnant again. Determined and unwilling to give up, she wanted to have a child of her own. Afraid that another girl would be mistreated by her in-laws, she fled to seek refuge with my mother while pregnant. My parents, being doctors, felt it was their duty to save lives and help those in need. Moreover, my mother had grown up with Lucas's mother since childhood, and she was pregnant at the time. Concerned for my mother's well-being, my father willingly rented out the old house where my grandparents had lived at a low price to Lucas's mother. However, there were some discrepancies in the narrative of our childhood friendship. I had never liked Lucas from a young age. It was common for orphans and widows to be bullied, and Lucas, over time, developed a violent temper, poor academic performance, and a reclusive personality, making him an outcast among those I knew. Lucas had no friends. His only companion was probably me, but I didn't enjoy playing with him. I despised his rudeness, aggression, and lack of manners. He harbored hostility towards everyone, and even a slightly insensitive remark could turn the sensitive Lucas into a prickly hedgehog. Every time he got into a fight with someone, Lucas's mother would intervene. So, I detested him. Detested how he instigated arguments between my mother and father. Fortunately, my father loved my mother deeply, so those minor disputes couldn't shake their relationship. Lucas must have sensed my aversion towards him. Whenever he saw me surrounded by many good friends on our way to and from school, he would consciously keep his distance, walking alone, not too far behind me. I knew he was always waiting for me to invite him to walk with us to and from school, but I never did. This situation continued until one day in junior high school. It's not just the sensitive minds of single parents. Many people are more afraid of losing what little they have. When my father went to school again to settle a fight on his behalf, he actually said, "Uncle, could you please stop getting involved in my family's affairs in the future?" People outside would say that my father had become too involved with their family, but I knew it was partly my mother's idea, and partly my father's willingness to share the burden with her. Every family should have a man as the pillar, so outsiders wouldn't dare to bully the women and children. This is the essence of the physiological differences between men and women that God provides. So, to outsiders, we claimed that Lucas's mother was a distant relative on my father's side, But over time, gossip and ill intentions couldn't be stopped. I realized that the painful remarks continually directed at Lucas were deeply hurting his sensitive nature. However, if he hadn't fallen into despair and lost faith in himself, how could he have allowed my father to intervene on his behalf each time? The solution was for Lucas to stop viewing others' kindness as a burden. Instead, he needed to discover ways to make that kindness meaningful, allowing others to experience the joy of being kind. On that particular day, while returning home from school, I unexpectedly encountered Lucas seeking help. Caught off guard by his surprised yet cautiously hopeful gaze, I grabbed his hair. "Lucas, have you lost your mind with all these conflicts? Who gave you the authority to speak to my father like that? My father is genuinely kind to you, always concerned about you, but to you, his kindness seems like a burden. If you're so capable, why do you constantly create problems? Trust me, I can make you see reason." At that moment, I was only 11, and much of what I said was mere bravado. By 13, Lucas distinguished himself from his peers with his formidable punches. Although he was perceived as distant, irritable, and quick to anger with others, he would only curse and grumble when confronted by my retaliation. After I struck him, my mother reprimanded me. I sat outside, massaging my sore backside, while Lucas awkwardly offered me 2 inexpensive candies, explaining that he hadn't reported me, but that my mother had noticed the bruises on his face. He advised me not to hit him again. The marks on Lucas's delicate face were clear, but his effort to appease was even more evident in his guarded eyes. I came to understand that his abrasive exterior was merely a facade, as no one else could protect his mother. I remembered my mother's words after she had punished me. "Sophia, I don't want you to be overly kind to the point where you can't clearly distinguish between good and evil in the world. I also don't want you to compromise yourself in your interactions with Lucas. You can dislike him or ignore him, but you must not bully others. That is my only requirement for you." I crouched in the corner, deeply contemplating. In truth, I didn't dislike Lucas. I just couldn't tolerate how he concealed himself with aggression and self-destruction, rejecting all the kindness the world offered him. "Lucas, if you can top the class in the future and stop fighting, I won't hit you again." Lucas, who was now crouched before me, looked stunned. He gazed at me intently before carefully unwrapping an almost melted candy and offering it to me. "All right," he said softly but earnestly. Then, hesitantly, he asked, "Can I walk you to and from school if I achieve the top score?" I held the candy in my mouth and playfully tapped the back of his head, saying, "Don't push your luck, and this candy is too sweet." I grabbed another candy and stuffed it into his mouth. Despite the swelling on one side of his face, Lucas's awkward smile couldn't conceal the warmth in his eyes. "Sophia, when Chinese New Year comes, I'll buy you chocolate." I refused, saying that chocolates were too expensive and that I would purchase them myself. During the New Year, I chastised Lucas for considering buying me chocolates. However, he handed me a piece of chocolate from his own savings, which his mother had set aside from annual gifts. Ella and Lucas were both extremely frugal, believing that money should be spent wisely. As a result, a box of chocolates was the most extravagant gift Lucas could afford. Even though his faded cotton clothes didn't match his peers' fashion, the vibrant sparkle in his eyes made him attractive. Yes, this was how teenagers should appear, full of life, passion, and hope. "Lucas, you must come back. It's all for your own good," Ella insisted firmly over the phone. She ended the call decisively. Lucas took a deep breath and then looked at me with a pleasing expression. I interrupted him before he could respond. "I'm not stopping the car." His smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I replied impatiently. "You can either choose to jump out of the car or come back with me to my hometown." Knowing I wouldn't relent, he tried to persuade me. "Sophia, you know my mom must have an urgent reason for asking me to return. Let's go first. I promised to make up for our anniversary." I couldn't comprehend how he could lie so shamelessly in front of me, but to be honest, the anniversary didn't matter much to me. "Lucas, think it through. If you miss our anniversary this time, there won't be another." Lucas looked at me angrily. "Are you just looking for a fight?" I despised him for using that phrase. "Is that what you call it? Your family sure likes to interfere in other people's affairs." Lucas burst into laughter. "Sophia, let me repeat that. If you have an issue with me, address it to me. Don't involve my mom." His words made me laugh uncontrollably. Exactly. She's your mom, not mine. If she makes me unhappy, I can tolerate it once or twice. But do I have to endure it forever? Do your family members think I owe you something just because you used to exploit my family? Sensitive as you are, Lucas, you despise being reminded of your past struggles after all you've overcome. You hate being reminded of your past failures, hardships, and the scrutiny you faced. Sophia, do you have to pick a fight to feel comfortable? I remembered the first time Lucas and I fought. It was about having children. Without asking for a reason, Lucas came in and started accusing me. My mom was wrong in her attitude, but she is an elder. You can't talk to her like that, I retorted. What did I say to her? When she blamed me for not wanting children, I became frustrated and asked, am I the one who doesn't want to have kids? Have you ever considered that it might be Lucas's issue? After all these years of trying various remedies and medications, enduring the torment of taking pills every day, you should understand better than anyone. Under the agony of both physical and mental pain, I couldn't hold on any longer. But Lucas didn't know. Sophia, you're getting more and more outrageous. After enduring long-term torment and being unable to bear it, I cried. Lucas, you never care about my feelings. I've made more efforts than anyone to have a child. What else will you do besides blame me, especially you? You never put yourself in my shoes. Lucas paused, then apologized sincerely. Sophia, I'm sorry. My mom has been driving me crazy lately. I shouldn't have taken it out on you. His genuine apology made me think he might change. Later, I discovered that while I was at home waiting for him after preparing dinner, he was out at fancy restaurants dating Lucy. Overwhelmed by medication and vomiting bile, I felt a weakness, like suffocating. No one could understand me during that time. He was at the hospital accompanying Lucy for her prenatal checkup. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I didn't even want to speak to him. Do you think you can threaten me with uncles and aunts? I retorted. Whatever you think, you can't threaten me with uncles and aunts. If we could have a child, things wouldn't be like this. I couldn't help but laugh. Lucas, the living can't control you. So what can the dead use to threaten you? Besides, you and I will never have a child. Never. Even now, I couldn't forget the moment I came home excited with my positive pregnancy test, only to have Lucas and his mother douse it with cold water. Pushed to the edge by Ella, Lucas was merely asking me to yield to his mother. Ella blamed me, saying it was unfilial not to provide the Lucas family with descendants. But then I became pregnant. I returned home with the test results, subtly asking if they preferred a girl or a boy. Ella threw a chicken into the pot, adding infertility herbs while coldly saying, "Abort if it's a girl. It must be a boy." The joy of pregnancy was shattered. I stood frozen, pinning my last hope on Lucas, but he simply patted my shoulder. Sophia, listen to Mom. At that moment, perhaps the child in my stomach sensed the familiar bloodline and wanted him gone, triggering a reaction in me. I rushed to the bathroom, vomiting until I was helpless. Ella came excitedly. "Sophia, are you pregnant?" I smiled bitterly. "I feel nauseous as soon as I smell the medicine. Don't you already know that? How could I dare to tell them I'm pregnant at a time like this?" She turned back to the kitchen, disappointed, continuing to add various medicinal herbs to the chicken soup. I touched my stomach, feeling homeless for the second time after my parents passed away. Initially, I naively thought that as the baby grew, they would accept it regardless of gender. At least Lucas wouldn't be indifferent since it was his child. But that day, when I had a miscarriage and lay in the hospital, Lucy's presence made me fully aware that Lucas had been cheating on me since I was struggling to conceive. He wouldn't care about the child in my belly at all. While I was mentally exhausted and on the brink of a breakdown, my supportive husband and mother-in-law were busy caring for another woman. Seeing Lucas's grim expression in the carriage now made me feel somewhat relieved. My child was gone. How could they live so carelessly? "Lucas, you and your mother's selfishness are truly alike," I declared angrily. Lucas, enraged and incoherent, pointed and shouted, I think you're insane. Stop the car." I responded, "Stop." He was so furious that he even reached for the steering wheel. Waking up from fainting, I could still see the smoking hood through the windshield and immediately thought of the word car accident. I turned my head and saw Lucas unconscious in the passenger seat, tightly restrained by the seatbelt, his upper body and arms somewhat shielding me as his body leaned towards me. I pushed his hands away, shouting at him for a long time, but received no response. The desolate outskirts were pitch black, with the damaged and flickering headlights illuminating a broken tree trunk in front of the car. In the distance, twinkling lights appeared and disappeared through the mist, not quite real. In a daze, I felt a sense of helplessness and loneliness, as if I were the only one left in the world, waiting to die alone. But I wasn't ready to give up. The person who deserved to die the most hadn't perished yet. How could I accept dying like this? Before long, Lucas regained consciousness. Eager to return to see his mistress, he had risked grabbing the steering wheel while I was driving, engaging in such reckless behavior. I didn't anticipate arguing with him again over this. I exited the car, and Lucas, in pain, limped toward me with his right leg injured. "Sophia, are you okay? Thanks to you, we almost got hit." Realizing his mistake, Lucas fell silent and followed me with a limp towards the twinkling lights. "Sophia, I'm sorry I was too hasty earlier. Luckily, you're okay." Due to Lucas's foolish actions, my plans were entirely disrupted. I stopped walking in irritation, thinking I had halted to wait for him. A glimmer of hope appeared in Lucas's eyes, but faced with my indifferent and impatient stare, he was completely stunned. "Lucas, you've done so many things wrong to me. Don't pretend to care anymore, it's disgusting." Upon hearing this, Lucas's already pale face became even paler. He then turned angry and began to push. "Yes, it was my fault just now, but are you faultless? Why have we ended up like this? Sophia, why do you always do things your way, never considering my feelings? I'm caught in the middle between you and my mom. Do you know how difficult that is for me? All these years, how repressed have I been? Do you know?" His words made my mind go blank, blood boiling inside me. How could Lucas cheat on me and then have the nerve to confidently blame me? Walking up to Lucas with trembling hands, I slapped him hard. "I always do things my way? Who listened to you and gave up the opportunity to study abroad as an exchange student? Who quit a high-paying job to wholeheartedly take care of you and your mom, supporting your startup? Anyone can criticize me because they are inconsequential and don't know anything, but you do. We've known each other for 28 years. You know better than anyone about my sacrifices for this family. Lucas, how can you be so shameless?" The more I accused him, the more I realized how much we had changed in each other's eyes. He had become corrupt, and I had grown repulsed. "Lucas, how dare you take my sacrifices for granted and still show me a face of disgust? Where do you get off?" Lucas realized he had said the wrong thing and reached out with guilt, but I pushed his hand away firmly, stepping back in distress. "Back off, you're filthy. Just the thought of you touching other women makes me sick. This person I once loved deeply can still feign innocence after hurting me? It's truly disgusting." Lucas couldn't comprehend the meaning behind my words and hastily brushed the dust off himself. "Sophia, I spoke out of turn just now. You know I didn't mean it. Can we stop fighting? Let's find a way quickly and go back to our hometown to celebrate our anniversary. Go back with me? Who are you being charitable to? Is our wedding anniversary just mine? Lucas, do you really think I care about this meaningless anniversary?" I asked. "Sophia, can we stop fighting? Look at our current situation." At some point, Lucas no longer tried to appease me as he used to. When he couldn't get what he wanted from me, he quickly changed his demeanor. Who gave him the audacity? It seemed that as his company grew, and he was referred to as boss by others, he gradually ceased to be the Lucas I knew. He became a puppet devoured by his desires, slowly losing himself. As I looked him up and down, I suddenly found it amusing. "Lucas, take a good look. You're the one injured right now. If I leave you here, you might not survive the night on the road. As for me, I wasn't planning on returning alive. I had already prepared to go down with Lucas on this wedding anniversary trip. Somehow, it seemed like the heavens understood my intentions, leading to this car accident. Lucas, how about we just die like this? A car accident sounds better than suicide." Lucas looked at me incredulously, unable to believe such malicious words could come from my mouth. "Sophia, are you out of your mind?" I laughed silently, tears already streaming down my face. "Yes, I went crazy as soon as I found out about Lucy being pregnant with your child. When Lucy's child was almost a month old, mine was just 3 months along. I was constantly worried about Lucas and his mother finding out about my pregnancy, which made me emotionally unstable and led to various health issues. Fortunately, my child was strong enough, and each hospital checkup showed everything was normal. One day, during a prenatal checkup, I ran into Lucy, who was also pregnant. It was ironic that Lucy, protected by my former good husband and mother-in-law, was being watched over with such care, while I, legally protected, felt like a lowly third party hiding in the shadows. When our eyes met, Lucy flashed a provoking smile at me. My already fragile state couldn't bear witnessing that scene, and that day, I ended up having a premature labor and had to stay in the hospital. When Lucy entered the hospital room, the doctor, mistaking her for a relative, reminded her to take care of the pregnant woman. Lucy's face filled with contempt as she taunted me. "Sophia, you are just Lucas's mediocre wife. I know he's on the rise now and can't afford the stigma of abandoning his wife after getting rich. So I don't care if I become his official wife. If you don't mind, then go ahead and spend the rest of your life in that cold home. But remember, life is long. Be sensible. Don't keep this child and ask for a divorce. You two started from scratch. You'll receive a substantial sum of money, which would benefit everyone." For a moment, the thought of divorce crossed my mind as a way to release both them and myself from this predicament. But it was just a fleeting thought, for I couldn't let go. Helping Lucas succeed and then allowing him to revel in wealth and other women, there was no such bargain. I loved him, but I was not foolish. If they could treat me this way, how could I easily let them off? In the past, when my parents were alive, I was bold and brave, being myself, knowing my greatest support was my parents' unmatched love. They gave me the courage to face the world. But then I became Lucas's sidekick, trapped in family trivialities and losing myself, becoming a paranoid woman who constantly doubted her husband's fidelity. If my parents were still alive, would they regret helping Ella back then? I had to make them pay so I could reconcile with myself. I picked myself up and started getting involved in the company's affairs. Personal transformation takes time, but thankfully, the baby in my belly gave me the courage to keep going. Except for the period of mental haze during pregnancy, I hadn't had any health issues after regaining my strength. While others experienced nausea and doubted life during pregnancy, my baby seemed considerate, causing me only to have an increased appetite without any other problems. It took me 3 months to familiarize myself with the business and stand firm in the company, earning praise from my partners. But in Lucas's eyes, I was still the imperfect me. At work, he criticized me for not being able to take care of the family, and when I resigned to become a homemaker, taking care of every detail, he pointed out my inability to bear a child, generating conflicts with Ella. Now that I was back to work, he still believed I didn't care for them enough. People are never satisfied, but that no longer concerned me. Just when I thought everything was going as expected, reality delivered a fatal blow. I managed to evade Lucas's suspicion by attributing my weight gain to work anxiety, except I couldn't evade Lucy's craziness. During a company celebration, I fell in the hotel bathroom, prompting a frantic call for an ambulance, only for Lucy to show up. She smashed my phone and looked down on me like a dying dog, coldly stating, "Sophia, I told you to get rid of the child early on. Being a single mother won't do you any good in the future. The company belongs to Lucas alone, and there's no way you'll get half. If you don't obediently divorce, next time it won't be such petty tricks." Waking up in the hospital, Lucy showed me a picture of Lucas with a cake. "Sophia, it was my birthday last night, and Lucas was with me all the time. If you had obediently listened and gotten rid of the child earlier, you wouldn't need my help now. With the child gone, you can finally leave Lucas for good." Touching my flat stomach, I realized in despair that all my efforts were misguided. I thought that working hard to secure my place in the company and building enough confidence to break ties with Lucas was the best choice. But from the start, I should have eliminated these despicable people. Maybe then my child wouldn't have died innocently, and perhaps I wouldn't be left with the last remnants of a connection to this world. Looking into Lucas's eyes with determination, I tried to make him understand that he was the one responsible for all this. My plan was to take Lucas back to the place where he was born on our wedding anniversary and leave him there for good. As for me, I would die in my own home. Of course, I knew my parents would blame me, but I really couldn't go on. As for Lucy, my lawyer would reveal the evidence of Lucas cheating with her after my death. It might not affect someone like Lucy, but how could her child live unscathed while mine couldn't? Lucas's voice trembled. Since when did you know? Does it matter? Lucas, I shouted uncontrollably. I regret rescuing you from the abyss. I shouldn't have interfered and should have let you struggle in the mud for the rest of your life. Neither you nor your mother deserve anyone's kindness. Previously, whenever Lucas mentioned Ella, it was like touching a sore spot. He stood there, frozen, looking painfully distraught. Then he began recounting the story about Lucy, blaming everything on alcohol. But I knew it was just an excuse he made up for himself. I never wished for things to unfold this way, but my mother exerted immense pressure on me. She behaved erratically, desperately insisting on having a grandchild. Despite having been hurt in past relationships, she wouldn't relinquish her hold on me or herself. Sophia, my mother, single-handedly raised me, endured discrimination in her youth, and ultimately overcame numerous challenges in her later years. The only thing she still yearned for was a grandchild. Being torn between you and her for so many years was driving me mad. If we were to give her this child, I assure you, we wouldn't allow her to control us any longer. We could build a happy life together, and I would make amends to you. I couldn't help but laugh at the notion of a future. Lucas, there is no future for us, I declared. Lucas stepped back, panic etched on his face, wearing a pained smile as he asked, Sophia, what do you mean? I sighed. Don't worry, I won't let you die here, at least not me. If I have to die, I'd rather do so with my parents than with you. According to our journey, we weren't far from my hometown. However, after walking for a while, the road still felt unfamiliar. As we continued, my anxiety grew, while Lucas followed cautiously and insecurely, trying to comfort me but also fearing my anger. His demeanor was submissive. The silence was finally broken when a child appeared. The child, around 5 or 6 years old, had such delicate features that it was hard to determine their gender, remaining silent. Without waiting for me to speak, the child pointed in a direction. We navigated around the bushes, revealing a small path. The child took my hand, and as I looked down at them, I felt a peculiar warmth. We walked for some time, and the path remained unchanged. Surprisingly patient and gentle, Lucas spoke to the child. Kid, do you want Uncle to carry you the rest of the way? It was clear that Lucas also had affection for the child. However, the child frowned and avoided Lucas's extended hand, gazing at me with longing in their eyes. I smiled, lifted the child, and a sudden wave of sadness washed over me. If Lucas and I had a child by now, they would be about the same age. Thinking of my innocent child brought tears to my eyes as the child, sensing my sorrow, touched my face with their chubby little hand. In that moment, I couldn't hold back my tears. During my early pregnancy, I had hoped to keep Lucas by having a child, but after witnessing his and Ella's true characters, I only desired someone in this world who shared my bloodline. Deep down, I was also selfish. After losing my parents and experiencing abandonment from someone I once loved, I longed and hoped for this child's arrival. Throughout my pregnancy, I had envisioned our future countless times. If separated from Lucas, I would dedicate myself entirely to the child. We would become the closest people to each other, bound by blood, the most cherished individuals in each other's lives after our parents. I wouldn't be alone anymore. But then I lost my child. Lucas didn't understand why I suddenly began to cry. He reached out, wanting to wipe my tears. Sophia, we will find a way out of here. If we don't, I'll protect you. Please don't cry. Disgusted, I turned my head away. His hand fell, and he looked forlorn as he withdrew it. After a long silence, the child suddenly spoke. Uncle, which path will you choose? Only then did I notice a fork in the road ahead. Lucas hesitated briefly, then looked at me and said, Whichever path you choose, I'll take the other one. The child, with a somewhat mature tone, added, Uncle, you can't walk the same path? Why? Just as Lucas began to respond, I interrupted. I choose this one. Seeing my resolute expression, Lucas gazed at me with a complex look for a moment before saying nothing more. In the end, Lucas and I took separate paths. Before parting, Lucas looked at me reluctantly and said, Sophia, if I find help, I'll come back for you. Whatever you decide once you're out, I understand it's my fault. Lucas's promises were unreliable, so I didn't pay much attention. I held the child and continued walking ahead. After what felt like a long time, the child spoke again. Do you know, children choose their mothers from heaven. They search very earnestly for someone they like, and once chosen, they won't retreat no matter how many setbacks they face because they love that mother. With tears in my voice, I asked, Sweetheart, how do you know that? The child's eyes were clear and pure, like stars scattered within them. He gave me a bright smile and said innocently, Because I also chose a mother. I searched very earnestly for a long time and faced many setbacks, but I'm not afraid because I know she loves me very much. She went through a lot of pain just to meet me, so before I was born, I hope my mother is happy and joyful. I'm looking forward to meeting her. Before losing consciousness, the child touched my face again and said, Mom, be happy. In the car accident, I only sustained minor scratches. 3 months later, when I awoke, Lucas was still in the ICU with little chance of recovery. Ella was harsh in her words, blaming me for Lucas's condition. But wasn't she the one at fault? The authorities reviewed the dashcam footage, which clearly showed that Lucas was responsible for the accident. The first thing I did after waking up was to stabilize the internal turmoil within the company alongside several shareholders. After all, if something happened to the company, I would have to sell my shares at a low price. Lucas's accident was sudden, and he hadn't left a written will. As the legal representative of the company, if Lucas died, his shares would directly become mine as the first successor. Other shareholders were deliberately trying to win me over, and that was when Lucy appeared. After Lucas's accident, I took control of the company. Ella's days had been tough lately, with her son in the hospital requiring expensive medical care. She had no time for anything else. Lucy was eager to return to her lavish lifestyle and couldn't sit still. I woke up 3 months later, waiting for this day. Lucy's cheeks were sunken, and her eyes were filled with sadness, as if she had aged more than 10 years. She was like a different person compared to the one who once showed indifference as I bled in the bathroom. She knelt down begging for my forgiveness. Sophia, I know I've wronged you in the past, but I am also a victim. Ella promised me that if I had this child, she would give me a lot of money. If my child wasn't the only one, I would be useless to them. If I had an unexpected pregnancy, my life would be ruined forever. I found it ridiculous. You're innocent? Lucy, were they forcing you to take that step? When you maliciously killed my child, did you think about how innocent my child was? The only reason I didn't get rid of the bastard in your belly wasn't because I'm kind. It was to earn virtue for my child. One was a mistress who got pregnant and squabbled over inheritance. The other was a wife who had worked hard with her husband to build everything from scratch, only to discover she had become a cuckolded wife after his accident. I had the upper hand morally and legally. After selling this news to the media, my lawyer used evidence prepared in advance to help me file for divorce. Ella seemed unaware of the seriousness of the situation. She still believed I was the foolish woman deeply in love with Lucas. She thought as long as she didn't agree to the divorce, Lucy wouldn't care if Lucas became a vegetable. But I would not neglect him. So even if Lucy used the child to threaten her, she wouldn't agree to the divorce until I made a move with Lucas's company. Ella couldn't withstand the media pressure. She was afraid of the escalating situation, worried that her son would wake up to a tarnished reputation, and feared the impact on the company. In the end, she had to agree. After a smooth divorce, I sold off the shares I inherited from Lucas. This time, I let myself off the hook. He didn't matter to me anymore. In the second month after the divorce, Lucas woke up. The accident had apparently caused him to suffer from amnesia, forgetting about his affair. He became a pitiful man, a victim of an accidental car crash who had been abandoned by his wife. Human memory is truly miraculous in creating lies to elevate oneself. He wanted to live in the lie, but I couldn't allow it. When I saw Lucas at the hospital, pretending to be unsurprised was fake. Despite knowing he had been bedridden for so long and likely looked unwell, seeing him in person was still a shock. In just a few months, Lucas had visibly shrunk to the point of looking unrecognizable, with white hair giving him the appearance of an aged and weathered man in a state of low spirits and confusion. But when he saw me standing at the door, he hesitated for a moment before instinctively hiding behind Ella, his voice hoarse and trembling. "Sophia, don't look at me. Don't look at me." It seemed he knew he didn't look good, so he dared not make eye contact with me. When Ella saw her precious son being agitated by me, she flared up, pointing at me and yelling, "How dare you show your face here? If you want a divorce, then don't come back. If anything happens to my son because of you, I will fight you." I didn't want to return either, but there was something I had to express without telling them. Through Ella, I could see the emaciated hand lying on the hospital bed behind her, trembling. He was gripping the thin blanket as if using all his strength to restrain himself, but I didn't care. Lucy's child was gone. Lucas's reaction to this news was minimal. In fact, when I mentioned it, the hand that had been trembling surprisingly calmed down. Ella erupted. "If it weren't for you, how could Lucy use the child to threaten me? How could she accidentally lose the baby? It's all because of you. It's all your fault." I smiled. I also heard that it was you who pushed Lucy, causing her to fall and miscarry, leading to excessive bleeding and a hysterectomy. You had to compensate her a large sum of money. Ella's face turned pale. "I will never give her that money." I shook my head, staring directly at Ella. "What I'm here to say today is not about that. There's something I need to tell you which may not matter to you in the end because Lucy won't be bearing your heir. Maybe there will be someone else in the future." Suddenly, Lucas spoke up, his voice hoarse. "Sophia, there won't be anyone else." "I won't. Absolutely won't. It doesn't matter, Lucas. Your decision doesn't need to be told to me. I'm just here to inform you of something. We had a child together, but when he was almost 7 months old, his father was too busy celebrating with another woman and missed his chance to be with him." Turning to the stunned Ella, I added, "Your first grandchild was killed by Lucy." Seeing Ella's face turn even whiter, I knew that from that moment on, Lucy wouldn't stand a chance at getting that compensation, especially with Lucas's sharp lawyers. This was one of my reasons for coming to the hospital. Finally, Lucas mustered the courage to peek out from behind his mother, his cracked lips trembling as he spoke in despair. "Sophia, what you said isn't true, right? I know you hate me, but what you said just now isn't true, is it?" My eyes glistened slightly. "Unfortunately, Lucas, when you were eagerly anticipating another child, my child didn't want you anymore. That was all I had to say. Everything else they wanted to know would certainly come to light. It just needed time." Lucas started coughing violently, his chest heaving as if he was about to cough out his lungs. In the end, he forcefully spat out a mouthful of blood, his face drained of color. Ella, barely recovering from the grief of losing her grandson, was hysterical as she rushed out of the ward to call a doctor. I stood there as an onlooker, witnessing the once bright and lively young man now reduced to a dying man withering away. "Lucas, I actually didn't want you to die in that car accident." Waking up from an accident, I suddenly realized that death is the easiest punishment. The one who made mistakes dies, and it's as if all their sins can be forgiven. But whoever thinks about how long it takes for the wounds of the victim to heal? So when I heard that you woke up with amnesia, I was actually happy. It doesn't matter if you feel remorseful or determined to repent after losing your memory. One thing is for sure, this event will torment you for a long time in the future. To me, that's the real punishment. Death would have been too easy for you. You have to pay the price for your mistakes, Lucas. I initially wished for you to grow old alone, forever living in regret. But then I realized it was unrealistic. So I only have one thought for you. In this lifetime, let's never meet again, Lucas. Because I have seen the light, I've decided to try and forgive myself and forgive you. There's a long life ahead. In the future, all I want is to be happy and live my life well. Upon his release from the hospital, Lucas's first act was to fire the employees who were close to Lucy in the company. Though he knew that even if I discovered his actions, I wouldn't care, he still punished himself in a self-destructive manner, seeking redemption for his mistakes. The amnesia was just an excuse. He thought that by pretending nothing had happened and then leaving the hospital, he could continue to approach me. He could repent and seek redemption, wearing the mask of amnesia to alleviate some of the guilt. But before leaving the hospital, I gave him a parting gift. Seeing my cold and resolute figure as I left the ward made his heart ache with heaviness that would linger for many years to come, even when waking in the dead of night. He worked hard on his recovery, only to find that upon his release, I had already blocked him, disappearing completely from my life. At that moment, he felt his life had lost all meaning. From the beginning, he knew that Lucy had approached him with a purpose. He didn't love her. In fact, he was repulsed by the woman his mother had arranged for him. So why did he eventually compromise? Getting drunk was just an excuse. He was desperate to find an outlet to vent his frustrations. He admitted he wasn't a good person. Growing up as an only child, he faced the scorn of others. Simple fights among peers would turn into accusations of having no father to raise him. Being poor became a reason for suspicion when something went missing in class. Even the money his mother worked hard to earn from various jobs was viewed with doubt by others. Growing up with malicious intent around him, how pure could he really be? He wished he could anticipate others' intentions towards him with the utmost malice so he could strike back in advance and avoid unnecessary harm. However, he yearned to face me with a clear conscience, the one who, though cold on the surface, would secretly defend him. If Lucas was the resilient weed surviving adversity without blessings, then I was the flower nurtured by love. When he had the chance to get close to me, he wanted to magnify the innocent side of his heart infinitely. He was willing to become what I liked, clean, sunny, and cheerful. As long as I was pleased, he could transform into anyone. But when did he begin to change? It was perhaps when he successfully earned his first bucket of gold. Under the admiring gazes of others, his vanity surged even more. Desires became like an endless black hole, shifting from initially simple goals of making money to provide Sophia and his mother a good life, to having more money and avoiding the disdain of others. Eventually, as Lucas accumulated more possessions, he lost the most precious thing he once desired. He became more successful, but his relationship with me deteriorated. Some people, when transitioning from their lowest point to their peak, always remind themselves of the hardships they've overcome, but not Lucas. The more successful he became, the more he detested recalling his past embarrassments. However, his mother seemed to relish reminding him of their impoverished days, trying to control his life. Lucas, I worked so hard to raise you, so everything I do is for your own good. Lucas, your mom just wants a grandchild. In the first few years of marriage, from quietly reminding him to have a child, to openly pressuring me with all sorts of remedies, Lucas felt like he was losing his mind. He could see my resistance to those remedies, but he was a coward, unable to stand up to his mother, only able to watch as I was put in a difficult position. He thought that having a child could break free from his mother's control and allow us to live the life he and I wanted, but reality proved him wrong, one misstep at a time. He couldn't admit his weakness, only helplessly caught in the middle, arguing with me time and time again. To him, these arguments weren't enough to shake our relationship. If there was one thing he admired most in this world, it was my parents. However bad their relationship might be, he envied the love between my parents. Their practical actions proved to Lucas that true and steadfast love really existed in this world. Even in times of arguments, they still considered each other, and in the end, dying together in disaster, they never gave up on each other. He thought that was the same between him and me. Just get through the childbearing, and I would never make Sophia suffer again. So, when he learned he had to face my parents, he felt unprecedented panic. At that moment, he could only think he had no face to meet her uncle and aunt. But as the accident happened, he deeply regretted it. He shielded me with his body as much as possible. In his unconsciousness, he dreamt that he and I got lost. A child suddenly appeared and led us to a fork in the road. The child told him that one way was the way back, but he and I couldn't choose the same path. Only later did he realize that it was not just one road. That road led to a life where he and I couldn't intersect again. The next time he saw me was at the seaside 2 years later. Unlike the tired and numb version of me he had married, I now radiated light all over my body. I was gentle and peaceful, exuding an aura nurtured by happiness. As Lucas watched me being embraced by the sea breeze, he instinctively wanted to walk over, but restrained himself. Soon I had a shawl over my shoulders. A man tenderly held me in his arms, resting his chin lightly on my head, speaking with both doting affection and helplessness. "It's windy by the sea. Remember to dress warmly." I coquettishly replied, "I know. I'll remember next time." The man wasn't stunning, but was neat and tidy, exuding a scholarly grace. I gently touched my stomach. "Honey, do you think if it's a girl in my belly, she'll look like you?" The man chuckled. "Don't say that. Our son might get upset." Then the man leaned close to my ear again and whispered, "Of course, in 2 more months when our son is born, I'll work harder to try to give you a daughter." I grabbed his arm and bit down affectionately. "You always know how to tease me." The man let me bite his eyes, smiling. "When our son is in kindergarten, we can have a daughter, and I'll protect Mom while brother protects sister. Isn't that nice?" I asked. "But what if it's another son?" "Even better. The 3 of us will protect you." However, I heard giving birth is very painful. The man fell silent, his eyes showing visible heartache. "After this one, I'll get a vasectomy." I laughed and asked, "No daughter then?" "No more. You hate pain the most. After this one, we won't have any more." Watching the 2 leave, Lucas felt a pang in his heart, then covered his face and burst into tears. He could have had such happiness. The next time he saw me was over 30 years later. Throughout all these years, he had been like a voyeur into other people's private lives, witnessing every major moment in my life without daring to show himself. He had known me for 28 years, experiencing every important moment in my life. I was the light that guided the first half of his life, but unfortunately, he didn't protect it well enough. And so, after I left, he found himself living in a year from the past, unable to move forward. Over the years, that man had been very good to me. So good that he had no reason to intervene between us. I had been well taken care of, aging gracefully, my spirits maintained by the protection of my loved ones, staying true and lovely as ever. "You promised to buy me ice cream after our walk," I pouted childishly, refusing to move from in front of a store. The young man beside me turned to the elegant man with graying temples, but smiled helplessly. "Dad, can you handle Mom?" The man stepped forward, took her hand, and lovingly patted her head. "Sweetie, let's not eat now, or you might freeze your dentures." I annoyedly glared and almost bit him. Don't underestimate my dentures. The sunset was beautiful at that moment, and the glow bathed my face as if I were surrounded by bubbles of happiness.